One thing that fascinates me, and I think it's very interesting really, is how you can understand a lot of things. And I think basically this can apply to everything. If you look in a macro vision per se, you can find everything to be simple. Computers, the working of computers, the working of power stations, the working of trains, the working of anything really. If you look big and you have the basic knowledge, and maybe not even that, you can still quite get it. The problem is going microscopic per se, so not literally, but going much in more detail. So if you leave much of the details, you can always have something, someone, everyone to understand. But not just that fascinates me, but how many things that exist have a lot of similarities of other things, and that may have a similar purpose, but just a different way to get it. But people find it so different, and I think that's quite the case with kinetic energy. Now, for those who doesn't know, kinetic energy is basically physical energy. So, for example, if I take my fist and punch in a table, that's kinetic energy. And a lot of things are kinetic. Your car, when it starts moving, this movement, it's kinetic energy. Yeah, it's kinetic energy. Because there's some types of kinetic energy. For example, usually when we're talking about the insides of a car that have gears, for example, we usually talk about the rotational energy as mechanical energy or angular momentum, if you want to get a bit more specific. But going back to kinetic energy, if you saw the title, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to put how kinetic energy is the main type of energy, or something like that, it's because a lot of power producing, and actually not just a lot, but most of the power producing ways we produce power are actually by kinetic energy. This is quite surprising because I thought there was so much difference, but actually it's pretty much the same way to produce energy, just a different ways. There's a different way to get the kinetic energy to produce electric energy. But first, how do you transform kinetic energy? So basically, by punching a table into electrical energy. Well, first, to be honest, it's not exactly kinetic energy, but it's mechanical energy. Mechanical energy is a type, if I'm not mistaken, it's a type of kinetic energy, so it is kinetic energy. But again, just the turning of something that makes it from normal kinetic energy to mechanical energy. And basically what happens, we take a dynamo, a kinetic dynamo, or an alternator, and we basically drive a shaft, which is basically a long rod of metal, or maybe any other material that uses to transfer mechanical energy to somewhere, to another place. And it drives around inside of one of those things, and it generates energy. I won't go into details of how you do this. I think it deserves a video on its own because I think it's a very interesting process. But basically, it is just the movement of something, or a shaft in this case, inside a kinetic dynamo or alternator. Which the difference is the kinetic dynamo generates direct current, and the alternator generates alternating energy. Basically, alternating energy can be way more effective at traveling long distance, like kilometers away, but it's not generally used in machines. And direct energy is directly used in machines, but dies down in the hundreds of meters or so. Uh, but why I'm talking all about that? It's because kinetic energy is the main way we use to produce electrical energy. And actually all of the main five, almost the main five types of energy production are in fact kinetic energy. And this sounds quite weird, and it sounds to me at first, but it all makes sense. For example, one of the main ways to produce energy are coal-based production. So basically, what happens? You use coal, and yeah, if I'm not mistaken, some places used to use wood, but simply not as effective. So you burn coal, it burns itself in general, and when you're burning this, you also have, for example, water by side. So you're boiling the water. That's the boilers. So in the boiler, you're boiling the water, and this water passes through a turbine, which generates mechanical energy by turning. And this turning is used gears, for example, so you can transfer these turbines that are turning because of the steam generated, or maybe another type of gas, usually steam, because steam is is very effective in this. You pass through an alternator. The alternator is used because it's used to produce energy in cities. So you have an alternator, and the alternator will generate electrical energy from the coal-based power plant. And okay, coal, interesting. Now something like gas turbines actually work a lot of the same. But if I'm not mistaken, they use the gas itself, not much coal. They use to boil water. Though if I'm not mistaken, also they can use both ways. Though usually they use the gas to boil water, so you also see that water is very it has a lot of use in mechanical energy production, and it boils water and generates in a turbine, and boom, have electrical power. Now those are pretty similar. Something that is also similar, though I think kind of cooler, are diesel generators. Diesel generators sound cool, but it's basically a big engine. It's actually a big engine. Really, if you took an engine, the diesel generator, and you take it, for example, in a train, because I think that's the only type of car structure you can put such an engine in it, and you configure it right enough, the right way, you will have it running. Because the diesel generators, they use a big engine, yeah, it uses a lot of diesel, and it's generally too big for any application besides, I think, tanks, really. And it makes the same type of power that you use in a car, mechanical engine. That's the mechanical power, and that's basically how the engine works. Which again, another video by itself. Basically, there's diesel, and it makes a lot of pressure in the pistons, which turns in a fourth cycle. One of those cycles generates power, which is when it explodes. That's why we call it combustion. It's combusting, and it turns the shaft. So it has a lot of pistons, so the production is very smooth. Yeah, it turns a lot faster also. So it's turning fast, and the shaft, the main shaft of any type of engine, and also diesel generators, and you have sticking out from this diesel generator a shaft, which passes through an alternator generating energy. Now, one thing that is also kinetic energy, of course, all we talk about here is kinetic energy, are wind turbines. Now, I think this may not be a surprise really, because diesel own this type of turbine, a wind turbine. You have a very big pole basically holding a windmill. it's not a windmill, but it's basically the turbine, the rotors, which are connected to a set of gears to make everything smooth. It's really interesting how the gears, of course, I would like the gears, and connected right at the end. Have you had, when you show, for example, images, you see the tiny part of the wind turbine? Well, that's where the alternator is. And of course, those are the big three, I would say. Uh, Actually, there have been five, as I said. One other type of energy, which may not be surprising really, is hydroelectric energy turbines. It's basically waterfall. It's not a waterfall really, because usually it's man-made. So they use gravitational energy to turn this, which passes through big pedals basically, and generates, and in these pedals the kinetic energy of the water falling will turn the blades, uh, and the blades usually arranged like this so it can catch a lot of water. They just use the energy to rotate in a shaft, and to rotate a shaft, and the shaft is an alternator producing electricity. And really, you would say, oh, okay, that's a lot of kinetic energy. Let's go nuclear. Nuclear is the future. I think nuclear is the future. But guess what? Nuclear energy is also kinetic energy. Really, that sounds really strange because when you think about nuclear energy, oh, this is the future. Which is, yeah, I think it is, of course. It's very effective. But you think that it's so high, it's so advanced that it would not compare to other types of engines, power plants, sorry. But, well, actually not. It's actually just electric production in a kinetic form. So basically what happens is that they use uranium cells, and they do a process which is the nuclear fusion process. I don't remember exactly what happens, but basically they heat up. It's a nuclear reaction, and this nuclear reaction makes the rods, which is usually arranged in rods, so the uranium fuel to become extremely hot and burns. Sorry, not exactly burns, but it becomes extremely hot. And what happens is that they pass water through it again, and this water becomes steam, and steam pass through the big turbines. So, also interesting fact is that the interesting fact is that generally they take the water and they condensate it again so they don't waste water. But every time we see in a film the big steam pile is just water from nuclear reactor. So theoretically you could just go there and bathe in it basically. You could bathe in it, I don't know how, but you could take like inverted cup, wait it to condense and drink it. It would be extremely clean water, especially there would not be any type of contamination. Of course, if the reactor is working. And that's how actually how nuclear engines per se work. They're not engines, they're just nuclear reactors. So when you say, for example, the enormous ships, water ships that are used on the military or in icebreakers in Russia, they are again nuclear fuel. Basically, they use nuclear power. That they use this process, but instead of turning that into energy, or per se, instead of turning them into electric energy, they just use it the mechanical energy instead. But that's really interesting to think about because the only type, and of course you can, I would love actually, because I tried to search it a bit, I would say I not dwell very deep, but I searched it and really thought weird how weird is that? That there is no other type of energy really. Because the only one I can think of top of my head that are not kinetic energy is solar energy. And of course, I like the idea of solar energy. Uh, but besides solar energy, what type of energy is not kinetic? The only one I can think about it really is the theoretically possible fusion energy, which I think that it actually worked one time, but it's not financially reasonable because it's too expensive to maintain and run. So if you think about it, uh, um, the idea of extremely high-tech nuclear energy is basically a bigger and definitely much better version of someone turning a crank with their hands and generating a volt out of it, some amps, just in a much bigger and smarter scale, but basically the same concept. So I think this is quite interesting indeed. Um, Not just that, but if you think about it, all of those forms of creating energy are also forms that I can be creating energy to move cars, for example. So gas engines are basically tiny gas turbines, but there's no alternator in the middle. Another interesting fact is that because of all this, trains, for example, they use a big engine, just like a diesel generator, which is basically a generator, because there's an alternator inside the train, and there are electric motors on the train. But those are just some fun facts. Think about it. And really, I think what could possibly, in the far, far future, or maybe not that far, but still very, I think it would be 100 years or so, to we maybe, I don't know, seek another major way of generating energy, because solar energy is quite efficient, but it would be again useless at night. That's the only way I think that it's not generating kinetic energy. But that's it. See you for now, and until tomorrow. Bye.